Tennessee lost in the Sweet 16 to Florida Atlantic. Monstrous scoring drought. And the Vols find what was close to being a pretty magical run, end with a solid run in beating Duke. But at the end of the day, this Tennessee basketball team is what we thought they were. I can't remember who said that. I think it was Denny. It was a coach. It was a coach for the Vikings at the time. But they are what we thought they were. Denny Green.
Yes.
Tennessee is.
This is for Ron. This is for Ron Slay.
Yeah, Tennessee is what we thought they were, and that is a defensive team prone to long scoring droughts and unable to just up and manufacture points. So we'll get your thoughts. If you want to post them on the message board now, greatly appreciate that. Love for you to interact. Are you completely upset, just kind of perturbed? Is this just the way that college basketball works? It is a tournament sport. So we'll just get your thoughts off the get. And also on the program schedule to have Fred White. It's a Football Friday with Fred. And we'll go ahead and get rolling right now with What the H? And it's brought to you by Campbell, Cunningham, Taylor, and Hahn. Campbell, Cunningham, Taylor, and Hahn. I'll tell you more. What the H?
What the? What was he thinking?
Release the hounds.
The Dave Hooker Show.
Keep cool.
A presentation of OffTheHookSports.com.
I'm going to ask this in a strange way, Caleb, so work with me. Campbell, Cunningham, Taylor, and Hahn will provide you with fantastic eye care. I've got my LASIK, no glasses, no contacts. Love it. Can see far away, can see close up. That is Campbell, Cunningham, Taylor, and Hahn, and their local can't beat them. Campbell, Cunningham, Taylor, and Hahn. Cataract surgery as well. They've got the local eye care centers that'll take care of you. It's a game changer. I'll tell you that. Campbell, Cunningham, Taylor, and Hahn. All right, what the H? The scoring drought in the beginning of the second half. I want to ask you at a really base level, what was Rick Barnes thinking? Okay, because the reason I want to ask it like that is because I understand that he likes for his players to overcome scoring droughts and overcome tough times. And I think at the end, if you do that in January, it makes you a better team in March. Makes you player-led, which is good. But this is the Sweet 16. If you're ever going to break from your pattern, that's the time to do it. Call a TO. So what the H? What was Rick Barnes thinking not calling the timeout in that brutal Florida Atlantic run that ended up putting the Vols down by a couple of scores and was the difference in the game? What was Rick Barnes thinking?
I think his thinking was exactly what you just brought up. I think he wanted to play through the bad run. That's his philosophy. Rick Barnes, we've seen a lot. We'll talk about this more in the second block, but everything about his philosophy was on display last night. And it doesn't matter how disproven of a philosophy it is in basketball, he's committed to it. Tennessee shot 11 mid-range shots yesterday. Florida Atlantic shot 3. I mean, how many times on the show have I gone in and ranted about these mid-range shots? The worst shot, by the way, is when your foot is on the three-point line and you know it's on the three-point line and you still take the shot. It's the dumbest shot you can take in basketball, and Tennessee took one of those shots yesterday.
Well, and you're not preaching anything extraordinary out of the ordinary. I mean, basically what we're talking about is universal. The best shot is a made three. The second best shot is a drive to the basket and an and one. The worst shot is the mid-range two. So we're not Oppenheimer here splitting the atom. I mean, we're basically pointing out what is considered nowadays. It wasn't in the early 2000s. I thought that, Bruce Pearl and some other coaches, they dictated that style. And now it is the style. And this is not groundbreaking stuff at all, Caleb. To the message board, Billy Bob says, unacceptable loss. Butch Jones could do better. Ouch. Fred said UT. All they could do without a true point guard. Great season, beat multiple high-end teams, and made the Sweet 16. Remember, 340 D1 teams didn't take their place. My take. Fair. Brett also says fans are never happy. So let me play the other side here in a bit. And I think that Tennessee is fortunate in a lot of ways to have Rick Barnes. We could argue if they're going to be fortunate moving forward. But in particular, that game signifies just a lapse in judgment in clutch time that you should call that timeout. I mean, for goodness sake, Twitter, I think timeout Tennessee was trending on Twitter at one point, and they just didn't do that. And I don't know that if in the same position, if in the Sweet 16 a year from now against UCF, another Florida directional school, and Rick Barnes is the coach, and they've managed to make the Sweet 16, do you think he would handle anything differently?
No, I mean, not really at all.
Not even a surprise.
Look, I have to say this. You're right about the timeout. I'm gonna go a little bit further. I don't think Rick Barnes oftentimes calls timeouts during these stretches because I don't think Rick Barnes has that many plays offensively that he draws up.
He doesn't have a surefire two? Is that what you're telling me?
Yeah. And you talked about this with Bruce Pearl all the time. The genius of Bruce Pearl was the inbound. Bruce Pearl lived and died to make sure he always had to play off an inbounds pass. Always. And I don't, and I'm sure he always had to play after a timeout. I don't think this isn't to say Rick Barnes can't make adjustments. We saw this last week. Duke went to a zone because they were in foul trouble, and immediately he goes, "Hey, Olivier, just start taking shots from the free throw line. They're not going to guard you." And he did it, and Olivier went off. That was great coaching. So this isn't to say that Rick Barnes doesn't make adjustments. It is to say that he doesn't make complex offensive adjustments throughout the game. And there's a difference. I want to point this out, Dave, because we talked last week. Was there a little work in the refs yesterday? Yes. There were some ticky-tack fouls called early. I'll be the first. I will admit that. Tennessee probably could be upset about some of those ticky-tack fouls. But that would have most likely benefited FAU center Golden. He had 3 points yesterday. They shot 8 of 27 from three, which is below average for them. That's literally Tennessee's formula to win. And they couldn't win because their offense was so horrid because they only scored 55 points. This had nothing to do with anything about ticky-tack fouls or their defense. Their defense played fine yesterday. I don't know if you thought. I thought the defense was fine yesterday. I think it was just their offense was awful.
I think the defense is always good. SC Scout guy, who I believe is a South Carolina fan, said, honestly, I would be really happy with Rick Barnes as the coach of my school. We have 5 NCAA appearances in 40 years. I mean, that's the other factor that you gotta weigh in there. Tennessee's had coaches that prop their feet up and watch soap operas during the game. Tennessee has had basketball coaches that left practice early so they could go play golf. Please hit that thumbs up button.
But wait, SC Scout guy, sorry, you guys also have a Final Four, something Tennessee doesn't have.
That's a good point. Go ahead. But which would you rather have? Would you rather make the Final Four 30 out of 40 years? Make the NCAA tournament 30 out of 40 years, or make the NCAA tournament 5 and make the Final Four once? Let
me ask you it another way. Would you have rather been a Braves fan in the 90s and 2000s or a Marlins fan? Marlins got 2 more World Series.
I don't know. That's.
Would you rather be Utah, the Utah Jazz, or the Portland Trail Blazers? Or would you rather be, I don't know, the Houston Rockets, who got a couple of titles when Michael Jordan retired, but Utah and Portland were in it for 25 years and never won anything?
You could say Buffalo Bills, San Francisco 49ers of the 90s. The Niners just won 1, but somehow they're kind of thought of as one of the great teams in the NFL in the 90s. The Bills made it to 4 straight. I mean, that's pretty darn impossible.
Yeah.
But we are comparing apples to pears and apples to oranges to some extent, because they're not going to. The Final Four to me is analogous to winning a championship in football or making the college football playoff championship game. So, but you're not. The Bills did that 4 years in a row. You're not that. I mean, you're not even close to that. And again, the Braves, they won 1 championship. Tennessee's not close to that. What's that?
In a strike-shortened season.
Right. But at this point, I think Tennessee fans would take anything and the base level. I mean, they would take if we're talking Final Four, if we're talking Tennessee 2 years ago made the Final Four, we're not even having this discussion. This is just the repeat of the shortcoming in the NCAA tournament.
Losing to a lower seed every single year.
Well, yes. and that's Rick Barnes' style, and a losing record now, I believe, in the NCAA tournament. Travis says, I don't know enough about basketball for sure, but I would have benched Key after his 5th missed shot and definitely stopped their run with a TO. Would you have benched Key at that point?
I mean, the thing with Tyreek Key is he's been awful offensively ever since SEC play, but his perimeter defense is there. And the thing you couldn't afford was for Florida Atlantic to go off shooting from 3. I agree that Tyreek Key is probably the worst abuser of inefficient shots, but his length and his size and his strength, I mean, he's the type of perimeter defender you want. And between him and Jemai Meshack, you need one of them on the court at all times, I think.
Hey, Candace, thanks for that comment. Let's get a thumbs up from everybody. Smash the like button. Barnes' offense reminds me of Miles at LSU. He recruits elite athletes, but then handcuffs them with his slow-down half-court philosophy. The difference I would make is that Miles is recruiting, or was recruiting, a lot of elite, speedy athletes. There's this Euro field to Tennessee's program that is not speedy. I mean, it is not quick whatsoever. John
and
saying,
Barnes has some brain cells. Okay, sorry. I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's true. Barnes saying Barnes is 69 this July. It is time for a new coach. We have plenty of money. We may dip a few years, but my stomach can't handle more of Barnes. And then SC Scout guy says, honestly, the Final Four was great, but man, it really stinks going decades without sniffing the tournament and watching everyone else have their fun in March rooting for their teams. That is a great point. So if I could tell Tennessee fans, you can be in the tournament every year for the next 20 years, and you may make the Elite Eight, but you'll make the Sweet 16 5 of those 20 years, or you can only make the tournament 5 years and make the Final Four once in the next 20 years. What do you think most people would take? I'm really not sure. It stinks not being involved in it.
My question is this: is the national championship on the table with that Final Four?
No, I'm capping it.
No, then yeah, I say take the NCAA tournament the next 20 years. If you say you'll make it 5, but you'll get a national title out of it, because the ultimate goal is always the national title. The ultimate goal is always the national title. And I say this with the Giants. There's a debate about whether or not drafting Eli Manning really worked out for the Giants. I'm like, they were awful for Eli Manning most of their career, but he got to 2 Super Bowls. I mean, they were terrible the rest of the time, but those 2 playoff runs made Eli Manning worth it.
Well, and one was the luckiest catch in the history of man, but I don't even want to get into that. That was the dumbest play to be one of the all-time NFL greats. That one really, really frustrates me.